Welcome back to One Winning Pod, where Todd Monken is our new offensive coordinator. He is a 57-year-old coaching veteran who's been coaching in various, capacities for 34 years. Last stop was in Georgia, leading them to 2 national championships. Previous coordinator in 2019 with the Browns, and also 2016 through 2018 with the Bucs. Looking forward to seeing this guy and what he'll do with our offense. Guys, how are you feeling about this acquisition?
Well, I mean, my initial reaction as someone who, I'll admit it, I don't know the coaches in the NFL or in college football outside of whoever's on the Ravens terribly well. It's just a weak spot in my following of the sport, I guess, as we get older. There's only so much energy for anything. So I wasn't really keeping track of the names of guys, and this is not someone who I knew terribly well. So my initial reaction was really excited that we got someone out of the organization. That was my number one thing. With all due respect to everyone who is there, I just think they needed an outside voice, just to get some new ideas in there to mesh with what's already working. So that was what I thought at first. And then finding out that he was the offensive coordinator at Georgia. Well, I didn't watch much college football this year, but I watched the championship game and loved seeing everything Georgia was doing there. Their offense was really exciting to watch in that game. And seeing he was there with Tampa Bay when they had really strong passing offenses, 2019, which was maybe Baker Mayfield's best year in the pros, actually probably his best year in the pros. The more I look at it, there's a lot to like. Was he the best possible name the Ravens could have gotten? I'm not sure, but I think that my initial reaction, without getting into the details, checks a lot of the boxes we were looking for, and certainly seems like something that can put the Ravens in a good position.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I do think there's a lot of positive reactions around the fan base for Monken. Yeah, I think his work at Georgia the past couple of years, I think, are getting people really excited. I know Georgia fans in particular are really upset that he's gone. I feel like I'm a little on the fence. Cautiously optimistic, I feel like, is probably a good way of saying it. Certainly, I think he has tons of experience. I do like the flexibility I think that he offers. He's not really somebody who always runs like one particular scheme, is adaptable. I do like the experience with the Browns from a couple of years ago. They run an extremely similar offense as what the Ravens, at least what they were running. I mean, we'll see what happens with the new offense, what we want to run. But, so I do like that. I feel like I just felt that the Ravens should have gone in a younger direction, personally. And maybe that's just a side effect of Harbaugh being head coach. You kind of have to have somebody, an elder statesman, if you will, at coordinators, just because that's probably his least area of expertise. I think special teams, and I think even defense, I think he has a little bit more to contribute to, playing cornerback for a little bit in, I think, his college career. So yeah, cautiously optimistic. I don't know. We'll get a little bit more into it, but that's my initial reaction.
My honest to God reaction initially was, okay, let me go look up this guy, because I had heard so many names, I was confused who was who. So I went back and I listened to I think the show that Deep Cover did with Cole, where they went over all their people, and I searched around for the Todd part, and then I saw Garnett post a clip from the that's kind of been circulating around the community, about 2 minutes worth with him talking about the idea of passing to win and attacking all parts of the field and using the best personnel you have to get it in their hands, and doesn't really his schemes distributing it to playmakers. It doesn't care about what it looks like. And I was like, okay, I like everything I'm hearing so far. And then today I think was when I hit the highest point I've been, because the Athletic Football Show released an episode I highly recommend around the 32-minute point. They said that this is the most exciting part of the news that's come out since they last did a show. They're super excited for what he can bring to our offense. And it just kind of confirmed to me that I think by doing 21 interviews across 14 candidates, I think they found an extremely good candidate. I kind of agree with Chris that I was hoping for a younger candidate. honestly one that was almost less established, because one of the things I'm worried about with Monken is that I don't know if he wants to be a head coach based on some of the comments he's made. So maybe he's safe at the NFL, like, with us. But if he has a successful year and then he gets poached to be a head coach, it's like, I hope he brought in some good people that can run it afterwards. I don't want this to be a flash in the pan offense. And that's a risk you take with anything. So I'm not too worried about it. I think that's almost inevitable. But the thing that got me also excited about it is that, Georgia was upset to lose him. The Buccaneers were trying to rehire him, and the Bucs fans were disappointed when he wasn't re-signed. So it seems like wherever he goes, people are happy to have his services and are disappointed to see him go. So that's also like kind of reassuring to me.
Yeah, the one caveat to that might be Cleveland, but from looking into a little bit of that, it sounds like there was a lot of you guys will be shocked to hear it, but there was dysfunction there.
Dysfunction in the organization
while he was there. I didn't get a chance to deep dive into it, but the one article I read, because that was a question that popped in my mind. Sure, he jumped from Tampa to Cleveland. I'm going to guess they gave him more money or something. Understandable, but then you look at his resume and it's like, just 1 year in Cleveland. Why was that just 1 year? And the short answer is Cleveland. And an interesting nugget I saw in the article I have linked here from the Browns website explaining the move when it happened was a note here that apparently Monken did not call the plays when he was there. So it was his offense, but Kitchens, the head coach then, was the one calling the plays. For whatever reason, they didn't want him to do that. Right. Doesn't sound like a smart move based on what we've seen from Tampa and Georgia. But so I mean, I guess we can't take everything that happened in Cleveland and compare that to what we'll see here. But still another data point. But yeah, I mean, I agree. He's had success where he's been, and I would say more success than, let's say, before Greg Roman. We know when the Ravens brought in like a Mark Trestman or a Marty Mornhinweg, both guys who had, I would say up and down tenures in their time in the NFL. Some spots where they did really well, other spots where they did not as much. So seeing more consistency in his resume is another thing that helps me feel a little better, at least like when you look at those hires. I think just going from the past, what this guy brought, we're seeing more instances of consistency from what he's been able to bring from organization to organization than some others the Ravens have hired in the past.
I just wanted to look back at some of the other offensive coordinators that the Ravens have brought in and kind of like what their ages were. So it looks like Gary Kubiak, obviously head coach of the Texans for a couple of years. He's 52 when he came to the Ravens. Obviously only lasted a year, then went to the Broncos as head coach for a couple of years until he retired. Trestman was actually 59, a little bit older than Monken. We know what he brought. It makes me a little sad that reading these articles here that Kyle Shanahan and Trestman were the finalists for the Ravens that year.
Oh,
oof. Oof. Big oof. Big miss. But Marty Mornhinweg brought in as QB coach. I think he was 53, 54 or something. Kind of around that age as well. I mean, it took a couple years before he was eventually promoted to offensive coordinator. And then I actually didn't look up Greg Roman. I don't think he's that old, though. But yeah, I mean, it certainly tracks for how Harbaugh, I think, wants to hire offensive coordinators. I don't know what it is, man. I don't know what it is about the age of it. We're willing to kind of, sacrifice a little bit on the offense. I do think the good news, it sounds like, from the rumors at least, that Lamar did have some input on this. So unclear as to how much input that means. But, I think most of us would like to think that he certainly signed off on it and was happy with this move. If he's also upset with the organization, I don't think this changes anything. Not that I know anything, but, just that's my guess. But that's kind of another kind of like somewhat related thing. It's nothing to really do with Monken, but just kind of like the, what's Lamar doing? What's the status of his contract? Like, is he going to re-sign? What are the Ravens going to do with him kind of thing? I feel like I have no clarity around whether Monken changes this at all. Like, I could see if Lamar's like, cool, I could see us having an offense as good as what he did at Georgia. Let's ride. Like, come on, let's just do it. I could see that, and I could also just see like, well, okay, Lamar's not in their plans. Go out and get a rookie QB and have this guy build an offense around it. Like, I mean, with a guy with that much experience, I think either is possible. But yeah, to me, I don't know how you guys feel, but to me, it's almost even more cloudy as ever.
I think we'll get no clarity on this situation until after Tuesday of next week. So we're recording Thursday, February 16th. They said on Tuesday, what is that? The 21st? Yeah. Tuesday the 21st at 2 p.m., they're going to do a conference with Monken, and I can't imagine it being overshadowed by Lamar news. So, I mean, maybe if they reach an agreement soon, they can't help themselves. But I think that they'll not have anything to say for a little bit there. I'm hoping it comes sooner rather than later. I'm also not enjoying the baseline. I don't know if it's anxiety or just like uncertainness of the situation. I just want it to be over with and us be able to proceed with our team building plans. But I honestly think, if anything, this should be very exciting for Lamar. One thing that he likes to do with the ball is attack the intermediate to deep routes. I think Lamar enjoys throwing that kind of way. He attacks all parts of the field. He knows how to use RPO, and he knows how to use a running, like not even a running quarterback, but he uses quarterback rushes, and he's never had at his disposal, because no one has, unless they've been Greg Roman, a quarterback like Lamar Jackson. And I think it's going to be so cool to see how he's able to utilize his unique skills and the rest of the skill players around him. Because one thing that you'll see, I think a lot of people looking at last year at Georgia, they're like, this man uses a lot of 12 personnel. He loves his tight ends. It's G-Robe Part 2. And it's like, well, the year before he was throwing to George Pickens and James Cook a lot because those were the best players. Now, then his best players were tight ends. And I like a guy who, based on the personnel you give him each year, can figure out and adapt who he's going to be passing to. I think it's great. If we have two tight ends on the field and one of them's Isaiah Likely and the other one's Mark Andrews, I'm not going to be too upset. And I don't think many Ravens fans should be upset. They just sound like two dynamic players on the field that can do a lot for you in both the run and pass game. So that feels good. But yeah, like, we've seen him be successful with wide receivers. We've seen him produce a 1,000-yard wide receiver at every single stop while he's been a coordinator in the NFL, sometimes two. Mike Evans has had his best years under Monken. I can't see why you'd be that concerned about, like, I feel like it almost has to be a better offense from a scheme perspective, and us being happy. I think he'll have a better idea of game flow and calling plays in the right situation and not trying to like galaxy brain like we thought Roman would do from time to time. I just have confidence that this is going to go quite well, and it could go extremely well. But I think the floor is pretty darn high.
You started trailing off into territory I'm not quite ready to sign off on yet, but hey, I will agree with your last statement. I do think the floor is high. And going back to something Chris said a few episodes ago, that is kind of the direction the Ravens have to take with some of these positions on the offensive side, particularly wide receiver. And I think, looking at your offensive coordinator in that same vein probably isn't a bad way to go either, because we've seen the Ravens take some risks the past couple seasons in the identity of their offense, in the personnel they put out on the field. And like we've said, some of it's worked and some of it hasn't. And we've kind of seen the result of that the past two seasons, when it can go bad. We've seen when it can go well in 2019 and 2020. I think the Ravens have to do a little bit better job of having a sounder foundation that's more balanced, and that's what this guy has been at every stop he's at. He, like Alex said, he adapts to what's there. Now, the second side to that, and hopefully that I have no idea if this is what the Ravens are thinking, but what you have to make sure you don't do there is get complacent and be like, oh, we don't need to address the wide receiver room any more than we have in years past because our offensive coordinator will just adapt to having no wide receivers. No. We have. I think what you have to do, look at that, is be like, we have a guy that if we have injuries, that if guys we're counting on are out for key stretches of games, we have an offensive coordinator that can revamp what we're doing and can get us in a better spot where we're not dropping from one of a top 10 offense in the league to literally the worst offense in the league, which is what we saw last season. With all due respect to Roman and Huntley and what they tried, the numbers don't lie. The Ravens offense was abysmal after Lamar Jackson went down. So you look at that, I think that's something that he can help. This is a guy that can help with that because injuries happen in the NFL. If you're a guy who can adapt year in and year out with different personnel, I'd imagine that would translate into when you're having to deal with having to adapt week in and week out when you have different personnel in there due to injuries that will happen at the NFL level. So, like I said, hopefully the Ravens look at that as, we're still going to try and get this guy a balanced offensive personnel to work with across all positions, but we know that we can fall back and this guy can help us adapt in the case that we have unforeseen injuries or performances like the second half of the past two seasons.
You bring up an interesting point, Peter. It's something I literally said to Jason from Huddled Up Films earlier today. I was like, man, with everything I've learned about Monken over the last few days, I can't help but think if we had him instead of Roman last year when Lamar went down, our offense might have scored a couple more points. We might have won a couple more games, and it might have been the difference in the playoffs here and there. And who knows what would have happened? That's revisionist history. But it was something that crossed my mind too. Is I think that he would have been able to put back up the deck of cards after they fell a little bit faster and a little bit more resilient, so to speak, than Roman did. So it's interesting to hear you say that. I think you're completely on point. We have to plan. We have to create a higher ceiling for ourselves by acquiring better wide receiver talent and improving our offense in that direction. However, it is cool to know that he might be able to adapt and use guys like J.K. Dobbins more in the pass game. I saw what he used with James Cook, and I got excited because I really do think that J.K. Dobbins could be a dynamic pass catcher as well as runner in this offense. And seeing the way that he uses the running back in a couple of the film snips, I recommend all 22 films. Put one out. It wasn't really organized. He said he's going to do something a little bit better this weekend of just like film. And you'll see the running backs, even in the pro scheme, but you even see it more in his college film, and that's hard to find because college film gets struck down hard by the big NCAA, I don't know, overdog. Or I guess watchdog, rather. But yeah, it's something else. But I'm excited to see what he can do and how he's able to use the best players he has and put him in the best position to succeed.
To that point, I think that's another part of what he can bring that I'm excited for. We're talking about the Ravens wide receiver room. Questions of how good anyone is in there abound, but there is still the argument that these players that we haven't seen much from. Devin Duvernay, we started to see some from him this past season, but then that trailed off. James Prochet and Tylan Wallace, obviously, we want to see a lot more from them. It's totally possible they just aren't being utilized correctly, and his scheme, he can find a way to bring their talents to the football field and make them, at least contributors. Maybe they're not key role players, but at least guys who can contribute. Of course, like these, I keep having to say this, even though no one from the Ravens brass is listening, we still want to see if we can find guys who might be a little more proven than that. But it'll be really interesting to see what he's able to bring out in some of these skill players. Maybe even bring out more from established guys like Lamar and Andrews under his tutelage. And a guy, I'm not the first person to say this. Multiple people have said this, and I 100% see it with watching what Georgia did in the championship game. Honestly, it was the number one thing that stuck out in my mind watching that game before I even knew that the Ravens were, this was a month ago. I didn't know he was a guy the Ravens were looking at. Utilization of the tight end. It was masterful. Whoever that guy's name is, that guy in Georgia, Bowers, he's going to be tearing it up in the NFL. He's an absolute beast. He just looks like the next Gronkowski. It looks like a combination of Gronk, Kelsey, and Andrews. He's just an absolute monster. And they have him running deep posts. They have him out running seam routes one-on-one with the cornerback. They've got him running jet sweeps. I think I'm really interested to see what he can do with Isaiah Likely. And again, like I said, I'm not the first person who said this. Multiple people who cover the Ravens have said this, and I think we're all onto something here. I think Likely will have a huge year in this offense. He's really going to unlock him, and it's going to pay dividends for the rest of the team. That's something I'm really excited about, that I think is something that we can really bank on, is that he's going to have a plan for this guy, and we're going to see him really used as a weapon, much more so than we did his rookie year.
Yeah, would certainly be a positive. I think, with Roman being able to craft a run game, definitely a forte. But, even with the lack of skill position players, I think it's still, honestly, I feel like the offense still kind of like ran through the same players. Unless in the case of Andrews of just, injury and then maybe Charbel getting open. But, you saw it, like, repeated, just, like, trying to get Demarcus Robinson involved just because, like, everyone else, I guess, not being in the right role or just, not being the right fit for something. It was, very... I don't know. It was just very stale from just like a pass game of just always trying to throw to the same wide receiver one, whoever that is, no matter like, it's like as long as you're in that spot, like you're going to get targets. But if you're not in that spot, you're basically never going to see the field. So yeah, I may be, a little bit different on the show of just like, I don't, I certainly don't believe that James Prochet and some of the other guys are like the one, are going to be these skill position players that Monken is going to, turn around the career. I think, there may be one or two players like that. I think Likely is probably a good candidate. Maybe there might be one other guy on this team that might be a candidate. I think Bateman, is a natural one, but we know that he was going to do stuff before Monken came in anyway. But yeah, it would be nice to kind of have a little bit more consistent production from some of these guys in, the 2 and 3 spots. As much as the run game has been such a focus and Andrews have been such a focus, balance is good, I think that's one thing that the Chiefs learned, I think, from this year and winning the Super Bowl. They had a ton of balance. They needed to rely on that. They didn't have Hill anymore. They still could force feed Kelsey when they needed to, but honestly, a lot of guys in the Super Bowl, they stepped up. Juju, MVS, a lot of those guys. So, yeah, if Monken can bring a little bit more of that to this offense, I'm all for it.
I think it's been alluded to all episode long, but to kind of make it clear, this guy doesn't really have a particular scheme, so to speak. He's not like, I run offense X. This guy has everything in his bag, and he changes it up week to week, it seems, based off the opponent and what he wants to try to exploit. So I think it's going to be exciting to see each week what the game plan is, and knowing that you have a guy who basically is like the, we always make fun of Roman with the Cheesecake Factory of plays. I think this guy might have a Cheesecake Factory level of schemes up his sleeve. And he's like, if you want a little bit of Asian fusion, I got that. If you want a little bit of Americana, I got that. If you want Italian, I got that. This guy, I think he's going to have a little bit of everything on his menu and able to break it out week to week based on what the opposing team doesn't want to see.
Man. Well, the good thing about that, as opposed to Volt, is that if you don't break stuff out in the kitchen, it starts getting a little stinky. So... there's no, you're actually discouraged from keeping it, and never using it. So won't have that issue that we had with Roman, presumably, if that's true. One thing I do want to talk about, and Chris has done a great job at at keeping us on track here. And I'll be honest, I haven't done enough of a dive into this to give too much here, but it's the off season. Obviously, Ravens made a move. There's things we like about it. So of course we really, really accentuate that stuff and really, get overhyped in that regard. And like I said, thank you, Chris, for pulling the curtain back a little bit and keeping us a little tempered. But are there any things that we look at this guy and we're like, I don't want to say like necessarily red flags, but like things that might, we might want to look at that and say like, okay, maybe, this might not be the most amazing thing ever, right? To get us make sure we don't fall into the off-season overhype train. And I'll be honest, I haven't looked enough to look at what his weaknesses are. It's a lot of the coverage right now has been glowingly positive, as is expected with a big move like this. And we've looked at the numbers, and he's had a lot of success. The only thing I've really found so far, and honestly, this is probably more of an oddity than anything an actual concern. We have seen over the past 2 seasons Lamar's turnovers go up the past 2 seasons. A lot of that can be explained away. I shouldn't say explained away, but not out of the realm of possibility to say Lamar's trying to do more the past 2 years because of injuries or because of contract, and that can explain some of the increase in turnover frequency. One thing I did notice about 2018, the year that he called plays in Tampa, and when he was offensive coordinator in Cleveland in 2019, was he was coaching 3 turnover-prone quarterbacks: Jameis Winston, Ryan Fitzpatrick, and Baker Mayfield. But interestingly, in those years, all of them had some of the worst, and in the case of Jameis and Baker, their worst years as far as turning the ball over. Now, is that because of the scheme, or is that just because, just coincidence? I'm not sure. But that was just one thing that I saw looking at some of the numbers that stuck out to me as an oddity. Again, though, could mean absolutely nothing. Could just be a coincidence.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's valid. I think another thing as well that I've been kind of looking at is, just kind of looking at this guy's resume at Georgia and just being like, Georgia's had a fantastic squad. Lots of really, really good players. And some of the NFL stops, I think the rosters have been okay. I guess maybe you could argue that the Bucs roster was a little bit better than maybe they turned out to be because they went on to win the Super Bowl 2 years later. I think on the offense, they definitely had some guys, but it wasn't until they kind of got Brady and Gronk that it really started to all come together. But for Georgia, yeah, I mean, certainly, that's a powerhouse down there. Lots of recruits, lots of guys who got drafted very highly in the NFL. There's always the question, I think, of just, is it the coaching or is it just the quality of player that you get there? I think it's fair. I don't say that as like I think he's going to be garbage, but it's just to support the kind of cautiously optimistic. Like, he could be good, could not be so good. It's not a hire that I'm like, oh wow, this is great.
Chris, would you have been more excited for Bieniemy?
That's a good question. I'll be honest, man. I think the backdrop of all of this is that, in my opinion, if Lamar's not re-signed, or I'll just come out, like, if he's traded, not like, in my opinion, this really doesn't matter. Because that's a mark of, like, it's going to be a rebuild. And just, like, at that point, like, Monken could be a short-term thing. Harbaugh could be a short-term thing. Like, really at that point, like, all bets are off. It's really hard to get excited about a move like this. And I feel like that's just, I feel like when McDonald was in last year, it was very clear of like, okay, he's going to be the guy. All the pieces are going to be here. We know who we're going to have. I mean, maybe there was a little bit of a question of like whether Calais might come back or something, but like for the most part, all of our key players were here. We knew that there were a few people we were going to lose, but for the most part, the defense was intact and everything kind of expected to fall out that way. On the offense is just the big question mark of, is Lamar going to be back? I think we're all kind of in agreement the Ravens probably aren't going to bring Huntley back. So now you have Anthony Brown. And then at that point, like, okay, the Ravens, we think if Lamar's back that, the offense, the EDC might bring in a receiver, might bring in a cornerback at first round. But, you don't have a solution now. You have a quarterback hole. Like, that's a big hole in this team. So at that point, like, you just have no idea what's going on. Yeah, so I feel like the kind of root of it is just all like around that. Bieniemy, I think, would have been interesting. I think there would be some risk with him too of just, I feel like a lot of this Andy Reid, it is a little weird, I think, for some of the players of like always kind of always saying like, oh, Big Red was like the reason we're in here, but also Eric Bieniemy, like, I don't know, it's like a weird kind of dynamic of like how much is that really him or not. But I was actually personally maybe going to see it would have been interesting for the Ravens to get somebody from the Eagles coaching staff, just because it's much more of a similar offense. But once the Colts hired, was it Steichen? That was pretty much out. So
I think those are really good points, Chris. And I think, just to kind of go back, I do share the concern about the interception rate that Peter brought up, mostly because I think when you attack the intermediate to long part of the field, it's just a riskier part of the field to attack. And the more you do it, unless you have a quarterback that makes great decisions, you're opening yourself up for that risk. To address Chris's concern, I think it's completely valid. Like, how excited can I get about this hire if we don't even know if Lamar's going to be here? If Lamar's not here, like, what's going to happen? I'm telling you, man, if Lamar's not here, this is what the Ravens do. They go ahead and draft or pick up, if he's undrafted, Stetson Fleming Bennett the fourth, a.k.a. the Georgia quarterback, who was the walk-on out of JUCO at Georgia and then led to consecutive national championships. And then you just say, all right, let's see what this kid can do. You know, you have his coordinator already. You already have some good weapons around him. You do the Brock Purdy method. And if that doesn't work out, you got some nice picks because you traded Lamar. And you go ahead and get yourself Caleb Williams. And then you got your next Mahomes. And then life's good. And then we're a dynasty. All right? So either way, everything's good.
All right, so I'm in the middle of you two. So here's my thing. I'll be honest, like, I love Lamar Jackson. I love the Ravens more. I'm fully, like, I have zero emotions right now if Lamar comes back or not, because where I'm at is, like, first off, the man's got to do what he feels is right for his life. I mean, we don't own him. If he feels like it's best for him to go to another team, he'll go to another team. If he feels like it's best for him to stay with the Ravens, he'll stay with the Ravens. But, you know, I have faith in this organization that if they lose Lamar Jackson, I mean, it'll be one of the worst things that'll have ever happen, one of the worst blunders of front office betting wrong on a player that they thought would be loyal to the franchise, would be able to be in the fold. I still think he's going to sign long-term eventually. I have no inside knowledge of that, but let's say that he doesn't. I look at it, Bennett, he looked great in that game, but I looked at some draft boards. I don't even see him in any top 20s. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong ones, but
no,
I don't think...
That's what I'm saying. He's beyond drafted. You just, like, you don't have to use any draft capital. You're
sure, take a flyer on him. That's great. Yeah. I
honestly would be almost stunned if he isn't brought on to camp. Like, if he's not drafted, I think he's in camp.
Yeah. But that's actually something that I look at that, and I'm like, maybe this guy has a quarterback agnostic scheme. Because you look at where he's had success. I mean, Jameis Winston, he threw 30 interceptions that year. Threw 31 touchdowns, led the league in passing yardage. That offense was popping. It scored a lot of points. Gave up a lot of points, too, with the interceptions, but it scored a lot of points. That was the Fitzmagic year. Baker Mayfield, like we said, he looked okay. He had his best year in the pros there. And Bennett, like we're saying, not a guy who was highly touted. He's not someone who's being looked at as a legitimate or maybe even as an NFL prospect at all. And this guy was able to get a great year out of him. I think that if Lamar's here, then that's going to be great for him. He'll really thrive. But I do think that if the Ravens have to move on from Lamar, this is the type of coordinator you want to try and find someone and get them in an offense where they can be successful quickly. And it would not be a route that would be pretty. Like, there would be bumps along the road. I don't know. There might be a little bit of a playoff drought there, but it looks to me like the Ravens are covering both bases with this hire. If Lamar's back, you're golden. If he's not, then you've already done step one to rebuilding an offense around the new quarterback and getting them successful. We'll see what happens. I don't know, but that's where I stand right now. And again, if Lamar doesn't come back to the Ravens, I'll be disappointed as everyone else, but you got to have faith in a front office that has gotten to a lot of playoff games, gotten to 2 Super Bowls. The Ravens will be able to recover from that within 3 years, I believe, fully. That's how good this organization is. And I think this hire is something that would help them in that situation.
That's a good point, yeah. It definitely feels like a move that you make to hedge your bets, you know?
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I think maybe Stetson Bennett is your quarterback 2 If you have to go with the undrafted guys, because he has a lot of the issues that I hate always knocking people, but he's my height. You know what I mean? He's 5'11", you know? Like, it's not really NFL quarterback height. You need to be really special to perform at that height. And, yeah, he has a couple other things. But I think he's a smart guy. He economics major, you know? He could do anything. But, yeah. No, I hear you guys. I was just trying to make a fun quip. But I do think it's a viable path forward. If Lamar doesn't,
you're making. Wait, I gotta stop you. You're making a fun quip. But if he comes into the NFL and is something with someone, you'll circle back here and take a victory lap.
I always saw it. No, I can't even say that, dude. I've watched no film of him. I've heard a couple things, or whatever. But I won't take the victory lap. I will only take victory laps with guys like Isaiah Likely. All right, where the first guy off my board, I was like,
"Hey, you
Ravens should draft Isaiah Likely."
Yep, you called that one, and you called Alec Highsmith.
I have to proclaim things like, or I should be like, the Ravens should draft, or the person the Ravens should draft is Alex Highsmith, goes to the Steelers. And he has 10 sacks in the year. That's that's the only times I'll say stuff like that. I can't just name every player and be like, well, maybe they'll be good. That's not the way I like to play. So, yeah. Anyways, it's draft season, guys. I feel like that's what's next, so to speak. Obviously, we'll do shows if other big news happens, like particularly that guy named Lamar Jackson. Free agency starts in about a month, exactly. Combine, lots going on. But I don't even know what our next episode will be. I don't know if we have anything we want to talk about that isn't Lamar Jackson related at this point. So we might have to take a look through our evergreen content and figure out what we want to do next, but we'll be around.
It's the off season. It's about all there is to say. Yeah. We will be back when there is stuff to talk about.
Very healthy way to do it. For now, you can find us on Twitter at OneWinningPod. Email us onewinningpod@gmail.com. Find our website, onewinningpod.com. Find our YouTube channel at OneWinningPod. We'll be doing something eventually soon. And we won't waste your time when there's nothing else to say. So, see you when we see you. And feel free to reach out during the meantime.